Hi, I'm Terry Murphy, Senior Editor for Realty Times, Women in Business, Women in Real Estate, and In the Men's Room with Murph. And boy, do we have a gift in the men's room. And his name is John Ruhlin. He has written the book Giftology, and he has brought giving gifts to a level that is unprecedented. He's an international keynote speaker, an author, an entrepreneur, a dad of 4 girls. Just saying. You know what I loved about everything about you, especially with the gift I got, which we'll talk about shortly, is being an expert gift giver. And you did a blog in 2015 that said, okay, tinsel's gone, pine needles are vacuumed up. Now what? What happened? So, and then on top of this, you little overachiever, you were the #1, you outsold everybody in the company of a thing, Cutco. Yeah, we've all heard of it. Okay, what happened to you? I mean, seriously.
Well, let me first say that if you're wanting to skip the episode because you're like, gifting, like that seems woo-woo and like that's not your love language or whatever. Like if you don't care about gifts, I don't either. But everybody cares about relationships. And so that really the core of what we're talking about in any sort of business sense is that every business rises and falls on relationships with employees, clients, suppliers, referral sources, board of directors, investors. I don't care what industry you're in, it's all people driven. And most leaders suck at showing gratitude and generosity and appreciation for the relationships that really make their business tick. And so the core of what I teach, my love language isn't gifting. I grew up milking goats on a farm in Ohio. So I didn't grow up around, you're one of 9 kids. So like I grew up one of 6, my mom's one of 13, my wife's mom's one of 13. I grew up like a farm family. So I wasn't like getting nice gifts. I wasn't getting like fine china and like hanging out at the country club. But I learned early on from a mentor who is a rainmaker attorney how to show up for people and show generosity to people. And when you show up for people in a genuine way, no strings attached, relationships flourish and you get referrals and they remember you 10 years later and open the door to get you the deal or the media opportunity or whatever. And so the core of Giftology, the core of what we do, yes, we do cool, amazing, thoughtful gifts, but it's not the typical swag, trinkets, promotional items that everybody thinks about, Harry and David baskets, like all that stuff is just stuff. And that doesn't move somebody's heart. It doesn't inspire people. So the core of what we teach is relationship building.
And I just want to punctuate something we talked about pre-interview, and that was we talked about that gifts are very, in a lot of ways, manipulation. And not intentionally manipulative. But I mean, if I give you, something, generally in the rules of reciprocity, you give something back. But in your case, we talked about, manipulation versus inspiration. And boy, did that ever resonate with me. Part of the company, your slogan is that we are a gift strategy and logistics company. Now, what do you mean by logistics?
Well, it's not hard. If somebody wants to be a great gift giver, all they have to do is put intentionality and thought and energy into it. I tell a lot of times we get CEOs, men and women, they're like, hey, can you help me with this gift? I'm like, if you would focus on that relationship the same way you focus on your fantasy football league, you would be a great gift giver. But most people don't put intentionality and thought into it. So the core of what we teach is how to be really thoughtful in your gift giving so that you stand out, that you're memorable, you inspire people to be like, wow, this person knows me, thinks about me, cares about me, which is what we all want. I don't care if you're a billionaire. We all want to be not just a dollar sign. And so I think that doing that at scale. So if you want to scale thoughtfulness, the logistics part is difficult. If you want to do one gift really well, you can do it. If you got 100 relationships or 10,000 relationships that you need to appreciate at a high level, most people, that's why they hit the easy button and do an Amazon gift card or a fruit basket or bottles of wine. And it's the same crap that everybody sends. And so you're basically checking a box, but nobody's heart is moved. Nobody's inspired to run through walls for you. So you got to have the right strategy. There's a recipe. And so many people are like, John, I do giftology-ish. And I'm like, it's the ish part. Like you might give Cutco, but you don't give it the right way. You don't do it at the right time. You're a transactional gifter. You give a gift after a deal's done. You give a gift after a referral. You give a gift at Christmas. You give a gift at an anniversary. Those are fine. But if you're married and you only show up on Valentine's Day and anniversaries and Christmas, those are table stakes times. And if you only show up for a transactional expected times in business, don't expect them to be blown away. But if you start showing up for a relationship and get the timing right, and you show up on random Tuesdays, like that's where you earn brownie points, whether it's your marriage or whether it's your clients or your employees. And so many times people are like, well, John, I do it, but I kind of do it. And I'm like, no, like it's like baking bread. You could bake bread 1,000 times or 100,000 times, but if you don't put yeast in, don't expect to get bread. And don't expect to send a bunch of crappy wine automated from a website, or expect to give somebody a piece of plastic and say, go buy your own gift, which is what a gift card is, and expect to get the results that we get for our clients. It's not rocket science, but most people want to cut corners and they want to automate, and they don't realize that relationships aren't automated.
So I want to bring us back a little bit because there's so much about you that I want to share with everyone. So you founded the Giftology Group in college. Okay. Most everybody else was, where am I and what day is it? As a way to market Cutco cutlery as a high-end corporate gift to companies of all sizes. Now, let me tell you something. Cutco's terrific, but what were you thinking?
Well, I was thinking, a lot of your best ideas come out of desperation, right? When you're hungry, when your back's against the wall. I grew up poor. My parents couldn't pay for school. I was at a private Christian university, Malone University in Canton, Ohio. And I was like, I wanted to graduate debt free, and I wasn't taking out loans or anything. And so out of desperation, I interned with Cutco, the knife company. And I had no idea what it was. I didn't know 2 million people had sold it over 70 years. But my mentor, Paul, the attorney, was the guy who really got me thinking differently about gifts. Like, he was the guy who would just buy a semi-load of noodles because he found a deal on them, and everybody at church the next Sunday walked away with like 30 cases. And I'm like, Paul, it was 40 G's on one gift. And he's like, did you see their smiles? And I'm like, that's nuts. But I saw how people showed up for Paul. He had been an attorney for like 35 years. He had an 8th grade education. And he went and back and got his GED and then went to college after only going to school to 8th grade. But he built his real estate. He owned real estate. He owned oil wells. He owned banks. It was all relationship driven. Like, he understood how to show up for people. And so I started to use the knives. I realized it wasn't about the stupid knife. It was about the fact that we engraved the spouse's name or the family name or the handwritten note. Paul was a huge on handwritten notes. Every day he wrote like 10 handwritten notes. And I would see like deals come to him from 30 years, a seed that he had planted and done something nice for somebody 30 years ago. And all of a sudden that person like inherited the family estate, and magically who was the first person that they called? Paul.
Top of mind. Right?
Got to call Paul, because he was most top of mind. So the knives became like, everybody's doing wine or fruit baskets, and we would do like 100, one knife for $100 or a full set, 10 grand. And Paul started to gift these out to people, and people loved it because it wasn't the same silly, like, hey,
it was also useful.
It was you. Yeah, exactly.
And you used it every day.
I mean, when you talk about top of mind, like, if you want to get referrals and deals, you need to be liked, trusted, which people are usually decent at. But top of mind is really difficult in today's digital, noisy age. And Paul was always sending things that were in the kitchen. His thing is like old school. He's like, if you put it in mom's kitchen, it's going to be there 30 years later. And if it's personalized and best in class, and it's something that they may not go buy for themselves. So now, like, he was putting into homes, and like, if you do the math, once a day for 10 years, that's 3,600 thoughts of them, their family, and their inner circle that are thinking about you, and like even subconsciously. So you don't need a logo on it. Like, this is like personal to them, but it's like, people would be like, well, John, I need to put my logo on. I'm like, if I gave you a Rolex, would you forget where it came from? They'd be like, well, no, I would. And I'm like, no, you tell the story of the Rolex every day for the next 50 years. Because you'd look at the watch, and the knives were that same thing. It was like, and especially during COVID, like, people were cooking more and whatever else. But the last 20 years, like, people like the New York Times would be like, John, what's the hot new sexy gift? And I'd laugh and I'd be like, mugs and stupid knives. And they'd be like, knives? I thought that was the college student thing. And I'm like, no, it's a today thing, because as humans, we break bread with our inner circle. That's like still the same in 2021 as it was 2,000 years ago.
And you were the #1 distributor. This little character from there you were selling knives.
Country bumpkin. If you could have seen, if you saw the Mickey Mouse tie and the glasses I had on when I went to the interview, you'd be like, that is not you. That is not. I was the greenest of green. It really wasn't about, I was not good at sales, but I was good at mimicking Paul. I've always been good at finding the angle and seeing what I was like. Paul's 60. I'm 20. If I mimic what Paul does, then I'm going to be him someday. And it's crazy. I mean, he had 3 daughters. I had 4. I had to one up him, I guess. But I was like, literally, I had 40 years to get there. And so I just started to show up for people, like I was investing as a college kid, $500 a month in gifts. Most people in business.
You don't do that.
It's they don't do it in business. And so like when we start to talk to people like, oh, my gifting budget's this. I'm like, well, what's your alcohol budget? What's your hotel budget? What's your sponsorship budget? What's your overhead with employees? What's your, what are you spending on your BMW lease? How about you start investing that in relationships? That's what I was, driving a beat up S10 pickup truck around selling these knives. I was the number 1 out of 2 million because we were teaching people how to use the tool, the knife, as the delivery vehicle for an emotion. It wasn't about the knife. It was about how you were making somebody feel. And then every day they remembered that feeling, even subconsciously. That's how you get referrals without asking. That's how you get doors open. That's how you get opportunities that show up 5 and 10 years later. Most people say they're playing the long game, but their long game is a few days, not decades. The long game is decades.
Well, you talk about impacting relationships and sales, obviously, because if people only understood that people still buy from people they know, like, and trust. I mean, there's the one-offs, right? But clearly it's a relationship driven thing. And I don't think people understand that a relationship is much like a plant or a pet. You can't feed it once a year, just at Christmas. And the fact that you sent me nuts and I'm allergic to them could be an issue. Okay. And I come from a place where knives are big. So, I mean, but because every single time you use it, you have to think about where you got it. I mean, you just do. And that makes me feel appreciated. There's gratitude there. It makes me feel valuable and it makes me feel recognized. So those elements, you talk about the proven process of evaluate, action plan, execute, follow up. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I think that most people, when they're thinking about, like, first off, I'll say, hey, what's your relationship plan? If your business is of referrals, deals, employees, retention, clients, it's humans, what's your plan to show gratitude to those people? Because if you don't, it's like a spouse. If you don't love your spouse and show up for your spouse, guess what? Somebody else will, and that spouse will no longer exist. They will go somewhere else over time. And human beings are that way in business too. And so I'm like, hey, what's your plan? Like, what's your 3 to 5 to 10 year plan of how you're going to show up for these relationships? And most leaders have a deer in the headlights look. They're like, what are you talking about? I have a marketing plan, I have an operations plan, I have a finance plan, I don't have a relationship plan. I'm like, you should be reinvesting. It should be a math equation. You should be reinvesting 5 to 15% of net. I don't care what your gross is, net profits back into your relationships to do 3 things: keep them, grow them. And the secret sauce is, over time, eventually, that you will inspire them to go be your raving fan sales reps. They will go want to run through, they'll bring up you. They're not waiting for somebody to say, who's your realtor or who's your financial advisor or who do you buy widgets from? They're going to bring that up in conversation because they're looking for opportunities to sell, because they just are inspired from a heart level. When somebody does something nice for us over and over and over, like to your point, not once a year, over and over and over again, we're inspired to want to go do cool things. And so the proven process is, you need to be investing a certain amount, 5 to 15% of net. And the who is more important than the what. Most people want to give a cool gift. Hey, what's hot and sexy? I want to give Apple. I want to give Bose. I want to give, Amazon gift cards. I'm like, I don't care about the what. The what is the 7th step in the process. You need to, who are you sending it to? What's the value of that relationship? Who are they married to? Do they have kids? Do they have pets? Like, what makes all of those things are more important than the what. The what is the end result. And so our process, it took 20 years to perfect, and we still keep tweaking it. But if your tribe or your following or whoever can go download exactly what we take a client through when they hire our agency to do all their gifting for them, giftologysystem.com. Now, what's funny is people will download it and get the playbook. And just like anything else, most people are good talkers, but gratitude is not a feeling, it's an action. And most people will say, oh, I'll get around to that, or, oh yeah, I kind of do that. But they'll never follow the playbook, and then they want the results. They want the referrals. They want the New York Times to call them. That's not going to happen on accident unless you're willing to show up consistently day after day and to love on these relationships well. That's the secret sauce, is that over time, it's like, a mentor of mine and client, Darren Hardy, who wrote The Compound Effect. Like, it's the little things over time. You do this. I tell people all the time, don't do this unless you're committed at least 3 years. Really, you should be committed to a decade. but don't do this for 6 months and then like go back to being Ebenezer or Scrooge. Like this needs to be a heart set, a mindset, a long-term commitment. Otherwise, you're actually going to do more damage to the relationships by showing up all really generous one time and then it's crickets the rest of the year. That's dumb. People read through it and they're like, oh, that was just to check the box versus this is who I really am.
So talk to me about your perspective on the difference between appreciation and showing gratitude.
Well, I think gratitude is something that we can feel. Like there's, it's cool right now at Buzzy. Friends of mine wrote the 5-minute journal, which is a gratitude journal. It's Tim Ferriss, I think, bought like 10,000 copies and gave them out to all his friends and different people. And write down every day at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, what you're grateful for and what you learn and whatever else. Like gratitude is really, really powerful. To me, appreciation is taking gratitude and putting it into action. It's just and most of the time people are selfish. They feel gratitude, but then they never do anything with it. And you're missing 50% of the equation if you're feeling something and then not picking up the phone or writing the note or sending the video or ordering the gift or like we teach our kids to say please and thank you every single time, every day. And yet most people are doing appreciation once a year, maybe, or twice a year. And it's not even really appreciation. It's like if you slam your logo on something, some crappy thing from China, that's not a gift. That's a promotional tool. That's a marketing ploy. And there's nothing wrong with it, but don't expect to move somebody's heart and soul and inspire them because a gift by its very nature is recipient focused. It's not giver focused. And so many people, especially in the US, we're very, we say relational, but really we're transactional. So many people do things that are not appreciative. They're manipulative. And because of that, they spend money to have a negative consequence on the back end. And then they wonder why they're not getting referrals.
Oh, that is just beautifully stated, beautifully stated. Well, so you've done work for the Cubs, you've done work for Electrolux, the Jaguars. I mean, come on, you've been getting around. Okay. And I mean, when Jeffrey Gitomer's likes you, yeah, you must be really cool. But where I was going with this is, obviously you understand the emotional connection that's necessary, especially in a time. Just look at what happened with COVID. I mean, we masked the one thing we do as humans, the universal sign of friendliness and acceptance and love, and then touch. Which, of course, if you're Italian, we feel like we've been double sequestered. So, seriously. So, you talk leaders leverage gratitude. And I can't spend $1 gajillion on each person because I don't know every one of my sphere of influence like that. So tell me what kind of ideas that you might share with people watching this who still don't want to send the trinket. You know what I'm saying? But yeah. So tell me about a time that maybe you've had a company that says you had maybe 100 people, that you did something that was so connected that it created that aha moment, that inspiration that you talk about.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I referenced this before, but I think that the people will use the excuse of I don't have the budget or I have too many relationships. And I'm like, well, that's fine. But oftentimes our businesses rise and fall. It's not because we have 1 million Twitter followers or 10 million Instagram followers. It's 10 people, it's 50 people, it's 100 people.
50, yeah, right.
It's a small number of people, mentors, advisors, clients, centers of influence, employees, whatever else. And if you have 10,000 employees, then you have different levels of revenue and profit to invest in those relationships. And so many people will be like, John, I can't do that. And I'm like, you'll hire somebody and pay them between 45 and 55 grand. That's a $10,000 delta you think nothing of when you're hiring somebody. And yet when I would come to them and say, why don't you invest $2,000 per employee? They're like, they swallow their tongue, their eyes roll back in their head. And it's because they've never been challenged to say, nobody brags about their 401k or nobody brags about their, a number of things, but they will brag if you something we do for all of our employees. We pay to have all of our employees' houses cleaned every other week. It costs us $2,500 a year per employee. It's worth $25,000 in benefit, maybe $250,000 for some of these. We never lose an employee. And there's a line of people that want to come work at Gift. When I spoke at Google, I had people pull me aside and say, hey, is Giftology hiring on the side? And I'm like, this is Google. That's crazy. Well, why? Because Google will do anything to keep you on site. They'll food, unlimited caffeine. Will they make your life better outside of those four walls? Maybe, maybe not. And so oftentimes it's not spending more money than your competitors, but it is being more thoughtful. And part of that ends up being with how you're using your resources. Everybody else is having pissing matches of big events and sponsorships and whatever else. Like, what if you just invested in your top 100 or 1,000 relationships that already do business with you? It's not spending more money. It's being more strategic and more thoughtful and intentional with the dollars you're spending, versus most people have a pissing match with their competition doing the exact same things. Facebook ads or conferences or sponsorships or swag or whatever it is. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the handwritten note, anybody can receive a handwritten note. And I have a buddy, John Israel, who wrote a book. He's a former Cutco guy. He wrote 5 thank yous a day, never missed a day for 365 days. And they weren't like one-line thank yous. They were like paragraph-long, thoughtful notes to the Uber driver, to the pilot. He had pilots come in tears saying, in 40 years of flying, I've never had anybody write me a thank you note and say, thank you for getting them safely from point A to point B. I get chills just thinking about it. The handwritten note, if it's thoughtful and done well, it's why we spend $9 on our sheet of steel letterhead to write a handwritten note, because nobody gets handwritten notes anymore, let alone thoughtful ones, let alone ones that are on a sheet of steel with Sharpie. So I think that like when I was a college kid, that was one of the things I did every day was I wrote notes. I didn't have a big budget. My $500 when you're buying $250 knives goes really fast. So I could send 2 gifts, but the rest were notes. And I learned that from Paul, that the note oftentimes was more powerful than the gift, because the note provided meaning and thoughtfulness and context to why that person was receiving something. It wasn't because they sent a referral. It wasn't because a deal was done. It was because I was thinking of them. And so now our clients, people are like, oh, I want to do referral gifts. I'm like, nope, we won't do that. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, show up for your relationships because you were thinking of them, not because they sent you $1 million piece of business. And watch how the relationships flourish, all based upon the context of when you're sending the gift, of why you're sending the gift. It's not if you give a gift after referral, even if you think, oh, you're being generous buying a $500 bottle of Opus One, they're like, they just made 50 grand on that referral. Man, they're kind of being cheap. Now you send that I don't like wine as a gift because it's pissed down the drain 24 hours later. But even if you did, you send that $500 bottle of wine and says, hey, I was just thinking about you. Now the context of that note has shifted it from a tit for tat to a relationship. I was thinking of you. Exactly. So the timing changes everything. So the strategy of when you send a gift, how you send a gift, the handwritten note, the context, if you get one of those wrong, it's like people will be like, John, well, the thought was there. I'm like, no, it's the thoughtful thought that counts. And it's like a chef who takes 12 hours to make this amazing lobster bisque. You bring it out and a fly goes into the lobster bisque. I don't care that you spent 12 hours on it. All people can see is the fly or the hair that's in their soup. And so in relationship building, the extra time to do the details well and right and thoughtful matter, or don't do it. Because if you do nail it, it's the ripple effect is worth 1,000x.
Yeah, so that actually happened. Everybody that knows me, that there's makeup and air and coffee, and those are the most important things. And I get this incredible cup, which is totally personalized. But that wasn't the best part. The best part is it came in a plain white box, no hoo-ha, right? And the size of the box, it was ginormous. It's just ginormous. And it looks really cool. And you're thinking, OMG, what's in there? And then when you open it, this video comes on, and this beautiful man who you just want to find because you just want to hear him talk to you because he says your name. And you're like, oh my God, my mother didn't remember my name. She had so many kids. And he goes into this whole thing about, and it's so personal. And you're thinking, oh my God, who thought this? And then there it was, Knife Man. And so, and even on the bottom, it has this beautiful, and my name, and it has the supreme happiness of life is the conviction that we are loved. And that to me is what a real gift says. Because you made a beautiful distinction, transactional. Okay. Yes, yeah. Appreciation is great, but man, this is a gift that will never end. It will be right up there. I mean, you couldn't have bought me a car. This thing is, of course, it ruined makeup because you cry, and not you, but I did. So tell us about how this came about. Is this extraordinary? Is this new? What is this?
Yeah, it's only a couple years old. So I used to make fun. People on interviews would say, what's the worst gift? and I'd say the corporate coffee mug or water bottle. Everybody gives them out. They're all cheap. They have a logo on them. You can only drink out of one mug at a time. And I don't care if you put Hershey Kisses inside to be cute. It's still a crappy mug from China with a logo on it. And so I'm like, that's the worst gift. And so this crazy guy emails me and says, John, I've read your book 30 times. I've listened to 80 of your interviews. I want to help you bless your wife. And if you know the book, like I talk about taking care of the assistant, the event planner, the inner circle, the spouse, the kids, those people are more powerful than the executive because they never get taken care of. So I'm like, he's using my playbook against me. So I look him up on Twitter. He looks like he's 16, Christian kid out of Georgia. I'm like, all right, I'll play. He's using my playbook. So I answer the questions. A week later, he emails me, John, the gift's done. I want to hand deliver it. I'm like, he wants FaceTime. He's using my playbook more against me. I'm like, all right. So I make it a public place in case he's like a stalker. I get there early, a couple hours. I'm hammering out emails, whatever else. He shows up. He's carrying this like plastic Tupperware container. And I'm like, looks like there's claw marks on the side. I'm like, is there an animal inside? I'm like, what is going on? And I'm like, Brad, tell me your story. He's like, well, I went to art school. I'm married, had my first kid on the way. My wife's a senior at college. She works at Chick-fil-A. He's just like this country, like salt of the earth dude. He's like 24. And he's like, I feel like God's called me to be a gift maker. I make gifts. People can't order them for themselves. They can only order them for other people. And so he proceeds to pull out 2 of these $1,000 mugs, $1,000 each. And on one is my life story of on the farm with my dad and family, blah, blah, blah. And I'm crying, pulls out another one. It's my wife's dad who passed away of cancer, I'm crying even more. Then he pulls out 2 vases. They're like $2,500 a piece. One is every Bible verse, Old and New Testament, that talks about giving, generosity, or gifting, handwritten all the way around. And the other one is my wife and I's whole life story together on this piece. So he just like hands me like $7,000 of gifts that are making me bawl. And I'm like, dude, where are you from? He's like, I'm from Georgia. I said, are you here for a show? He's like, no, I drove up to meet you for 5 minutes. I said, how long a drive is that? He's like, it's about a 9.5 hour drive. I'm like, dude, you are nuts. So I go home late. I'm at home 3 hours late. My wife's like, all right, what's the story? I pull out the pieces. She bawls. My wife is super private. And we only had 3 kids at the time, 3 daughters. She's like, was he crazy? I'm like, he's crazy like I'm crazy. And she's like, well, he has to stay with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he stays. We talk till 2 a.m. and I'm like, Brad, I will like, this is Oprah's going to get one of these someday. Richard, like Elon Musk, like I don't care who they are. Billionaires will cry. Like we're going to put a happy tears guarantee with this thing. And we're going to package it, because before I didn't have the box, the video screen and all that stuff. I said, what you're doing here is like, you're seeing somebody's soul and reminding them of what matters every single day in a functional piece of art. I said, there's nothing like this on the planet. And so we've been working together the last couple of years. And like I said, I've given out 130 of them personally to friends, mentors, advisors, clients, centers of influence. And the response every day, like even my employees, you see it on their desk every day. And they talk about it because they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel understood. So it's the Artifact mug. If you want to check it out, artifactmug.com. It's like become one of my go-to like secret, like Navy SEAL of gifting type pieces.
Totally.
And to me, people are like, oh, like I want the $25,000 Rolex. I'm like, for $24,000 less, I can make somebody like ball like a baby and it'll be 10 times more impactful. And they're like, come on, that's not possible. I'm like, let's try it with your top 10 relationships and then we'll see. And I spoke at a YPO event last fall, 4 billionaires in the audience. I surprised one of the billionaires from the stage with one of these mugs. The audience is all bawling. He's bawling. Standing ovation. It's like an immediate standing ovation. Like, I like to think I'm a great speaker, but the mug is like, when you can do that well. His wife was there. She got me the answers to the questions. It was like, it's like my favorite thing to be able to honor somebody with.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah. The emotional connection is wildly strong and powerful because it just validates. If you're just sitting there, it validates that somebody loves you, treasures you, is interested enough to make you happy like no other human could. I can't tell you how amazing that is. And I know that everybody wants to work with you because I would work there to do anything. I mean, I would clean the offices so somebody would clean the house because that would be so fun. Well, I know that you do all kinds of high-end corporate gifts. And I'm sure that where could people get more information about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, if they want the playbook, the giftology system, if they want to just reach out to us directly on the consulting or the coaching, speaking, or the done for you services, which is the core of our business, like people, will get a giftologist that they work with, and then they develop the relationship plan, and then they don't have to, touch the gifts. And, it's not, like I said, it's not hard to do one gift, but if you have dozens or hundreds or thousands of people that are really valuable, if you're looking for $47 boxes of brownies and $19 boxes of peanut brittle, like, we're not the company. But if relationships matter, then the Giftology Group is our agency that, we work from, $5 million companies all the way up to Google and everywhere in between. But our sweet spot tends to be small to mid-sized companies because it's the David and Goliath. Like, they don't have an unlimited budget, but they're going up against publicly traded companies. And I love, I bootstrap this business. I don't have any VC or private equity money behind me. And so I love working with the small, entrepreneur or business owner that wants to go compete at the highest level. And the only way they can do that is they can't outspend their competitors, but they can be more thoughtful. And so those are the sweet spot for people that we work with.
Let's talk about the book Giftology. I know that you have several versions. I remember getting one in a leather. I mean, it was like, how many books come in a leather bag? It's like, really? How did you think of that one, John?
Well, when I published the book, I self-published it, but I wanted it to feel nicer than any other traditionally published book. Nobody knew who we were, and so I wasn't getting like $1 million advance. And I'm like, I want this book to feel like this is my life's work. This is like someday my kids or grandkids or great grandkids, I want, even if they're the only ones that read it, like, I want it to feel like an old Bible, like the leather, like the Gutenheim, like that kind of feel. Because I realized when I started to do the research on books, there's 30,000 books published every week, new titles on Amazon.
Wow.
Do the math. That's 7 figures of books every year. And so, like, everybody has this pile of like should read, and most people never get around to it. And most people never, like, the average book sells 300 copies in its lifetime.
I didn't
average book,
know that.
300 copies. So I was like, I want mine to sell, millions of copies. Well, then I need to be different than what everybody else is doing. So and you've probably seen this. So many authors, speakers brag about how cheap they print their book. When they do it themselves, they're like, oh, I printed mine and I saved a nickel here. And I'm like, that's the dumbest thing in the world. This is your Bible. This is your life's work. And you're like bragging about how cheap you printed it. I'm like, that's asinine. So I went the opposite direction. I made 50 copies for friends, clients, and people I respected, not to ask them for a blurb, not to ask them to be on their show, just to say thank you for what they've done in the world. So I sent it to Darren Hardy. I sent it to Seth Godin and John Maxwell and Michael Hyatt, like people that were like ballers. And they were handmade one at a time, inside the leather bag, inside the linen box, personally monogrammed to them and their spouse. They were $250 a piece. And my author buddies made fun of me. They're like, you're dumb. You're going to go broke before you even sell a book. I'm like, you don't get it. So we sent these off, and Darren Hardy, who's, CEO of Success Magazine, now has his own company that's doing tens of millions of dollars in revenue every year. He's crushing it. He said, John, this is the nicest book I've ever seen. I get thousands of them. I don't read any of them. I read your book. It's amazing. He endorsed it. He's only endorsed one other person ever. Like, it's crazy. Michael Hyatt, he was a publisher at Thomas Nelson. He's like, John, I get 4,000 to 5,000 books sent to me every year. They all go to Goodwill or the library. I never read any of them. I read your book. My wife, Gail, read your book. I ordered 25 copies already for my team. Best packaging, best book, amazing book. But the book cover, he's like, people do judge a book by its cover. So I realized like I was onto something, and it was like, where everybody goes cheap, I go expensive. I do that with gifts. I do that with my business cards, the $3 metal cards, the letterhead.
Business card. Okay. So for those of you watching, here's this kind of crazy guy, and we met at a speaker's event, and he gives a metal card, and it's not that big. It's only about that big. And it's the most annoying card you'll ever get, because no matter what you do, even though it's electronic and you have it in your phone and in your database and whatever, you cannot throw it away. It stays with you forever. Thank you, John.
Well, it is well designed. It feels good. I have some people that just play with it as they're talking on their phone. Like it was my way of kind of like mimicking like Apple. Like, they're good with the simplistic design, but I wanted it out of steel because I was like, most people spend 1 penny on their card, And it's whether you have $1 million or $1 billion company, whether you're broke or rich, everybody's business card's the same. And I'm like, that little detail should communicate that you're different. Or that's what I wanted anyway. My original ones for $1, and it changed conversations. I got people that responded to emails 5 years later because I put metal business card in the subject line. So I realized, like, if you can go, it's like Seth Godin's concept. I didn't invent the idea of being a purple cow, but that's most people in business follow the same, they're sheep. They follow the same, in real estate and financial services and pro sports. It's like everybody looks around and says, what are they doing? I'm going to do that too. Versus if they're doing that, I'm going to go completely against the grain and do the exact opposite. And that's what we did with the book. And so now I print thousands that way that are in the leather bag, in the linen box. And they're not $250, but they're like
they're
like
still
$100.
expensive.
Yeah, they're expensive.
Very expensive.
But what's great is the amount of people that talk about the book, that post about the book, that share the book, that buy copies for their entire team and actually read it. I didn't want, and most people write their book to be a business card. I'm like, I got a good business card. I want somebody to read this and either hire me in my firm or go do something with the stuff that's in the book. Go be more generous, go be more thoughtful. And so to me, like the uptake of actually people consuming the book because of how it shows up. It's like when you get a Tiffany's box or a Rolex, it shows up a certain way. It's not in a crappy paper bag. Like
Exactly.
the packaging, the presentation, it's like when you go to a Ritz, it's just 4 walls and a bed, but the presentation matters. The Four Seasons, the Tesla.
It's the experience.
We all are human beings that want that tangible visual experience. So anyway, I have now another 3.0 version of the book that's like a few $100s. I have another version that we just came out with 6 months ago that's $2,500 for the book. And I don't send those out like candy, but if I'm going to send something for a client or for a CEO, people are like, $2,500 is a lot of money. And I'm like, compared to what? Like you would spend $100,000 to go sponsor an event so you can rub elbows with a few people. I would rather be the Navy SEAL sniper and say, I'm going to spend $10,000 on these 4 people. And oftentimes it's not even coming from me. Like when we gifted Tony Robbins, it was Tony, they hired one of our clients wanted to send them a gift and we put it inside this crazy box. And Tony's wife, Sage, flipped out because she was like, this is one of the most thoughtful gifts ever. But it was the packaging that helped communicate the message. There was a video screen built into it and some other things. But so many people are like, $2,500 is a lot. And I'm like, you'll waste $2,500 on a Vegas bar bill that nobody remembers the next day. I would rather spend $2,500 in a way that people are still talking about 10 years from now. Like I'm a farm boy. I'm very practical and I don't have an unlimited budget. So I think about things differently.
You do. So the question, I mean, first of all, the Brad that you're referring to, is that the same Brad that does the videos?
Yeah, it's the artist actually makes it.
Okay, so I'm just telling all of you, if you ever get one of these, you're going to love Brad. Okay, you just are. Because he's like a hug in a video. I mean, the man is amazing and I've never met him and I'm not saying that in a cougar way. He is just wonderful. And thank you so much for that. Now, I would ask you this question as a woman, and this is the Women's Wisdom Network. So what kind of gifts do you get for your wife who just gave you another little baby girl?
Yeah,
that's got to be hard.
Well, it's like being, I can only imagine like Santa Claus's wife is like, he's cool. He's cool to everybody but his own wife. And being the giftology guy, I mean, if you read the book, I almost died at my proposal because I didn't follow. I made this crazy elaborate proposal that I almost, it was supposed to be a Hollywood production that went bad. I would say that I have, I've knocked it out of the park with some gifts and sometimes I've struck out, but I'll give you 2 examples of ones that went well, that I didn't die from. One is, when you have kids, at least for my wife, going to the store is a big deal. And not just like going to the store, but going to the store by yourself and enjoying the shopping process of like going to Lululemon or going to Athleta or wherever you want to go, Nordstrom, because you're always in a rush. You're always on, like, you got a babysitter or I'm at home with the girls or whatever. And so like, I realized that like, she wants to be calm and enjoy trying on stuff, not be rushed. So I went to Lululemon and bought like $3,000 worth of stuff, all in her size. And then I outfitted our guest room with all the Lululemon stuff. And I left the bottle of wine and a note. And I took the kids out of the house, went to the park for a few hours and said, hey, you can try on whatever you want. You keep all of it or none of it. I'm not personally attached to any of it. and you figure out what you want. And she was like, wow, like that blew her away, because it was speaking to her love language of not wanting to be rushed and being able to enjoy the process of shopping, but it was brought to her.
Wow.
So that was one. And then during COVID, her birthday's in the summer. She grew up on a farm in Illinois, going to the fair, the local fair, and then the big state fair.
Right.
And, like at the state fair, there's things like taffy, and there's, waffle
cones,
all that kind of stuff. And in the Midwest, they take like 1,000 pounds of butter and they carve it into the shape of a cow. It's called a butter cow.
Right.
So I decided since there was no fair this year, I was going to bring the fair to our house. So I found the taffy, got that shipped to us. I went and bought like 20 pounds of butter, and each of our daughters carved their own butter cows that we were able to look at. We had little tractor pulls with the little tractor pull pedal pulls. We did, and then the kicker was, I'm not a big dancer, but my wife loves to dance. That's one of the things our girls love it, and I'll dance with them. But she'll drop hints like most wives will do for their husbands of things they would love to see happen. Most guys don't ever pick up on it. And one of hers was, my daughters would do TikTok dances. We're not big on TikTok, but they love to do the dances. And one of them was a Justin Bieber dance. Oh, so I got up at 5 a.m. and practiced and did a TikTok Justin Bieber with the Intentions song. Yeah. And recorded the TikTok with the hoodie and the whole 9 yards in sync with and replicated that. And so that was like what brought the house down at the end. Like she was laughing, and the girls are all giggling and on cloud nine. Do the dance again. Of course, I don't want to do the dance ever again. But
yeah.
but trying to compete with Justin Bieber is not a small feat. But so that's only been viewed by our family. But those are some of my better ones. There's been other ones where I've completely struck out.
Well, but you tried. I mean, honestly, it's the thoughtfulness, it's the hyper local relevance, it's the authenticity, it's the fact that it's not transactional. I think you've brought such a beautiful spotlight and an elevation to gift giving. It's Giftology, and you said that there's a book a process or a game plan they can download at giftology.com.
Yeah, giftologysystem.com. Yep.
System. Okay. Is it system or systems?
Just system.
Okay.
Yeah, no S.
Yeah. And John, you're available to speak, obviously, as an international keynote. And I hope you write another book.
I am. Actually, this is the first time I've mentioned it on any sort of media, but I'm writing a kid's book that'll be out by the end of the summer on giving.
Oh, boom. What a great idea. Well, John, I can't thank you enough on behalf of Realty Times, the women in business, women in real estate, of course, in the men's room. This has been an extraordinary segment. And I am so grateful that we got to meet, even though I got that annoying business card, which of course is still with me. I mean, I can't find major other things, but I've got your card. Okay. Thank you so much. And tell Brad, somebody loves him. Okay.
I will. I'm going to send him this interview. He loves the affirmation, and I will definitely let him know.
When he said Terry one more time, I was going to find him. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. You're the best.
Thank you, Terry.
Join us again for another segment of In the Men's Room with Murph on Realty Times Women in Business, Women in Real Estate, and Women's Wisdom Network.